Suzuki Shozen, what a figure he was. Can you imagine living in Japan's 17th century, a time so drenched in blood, honor, and chaos? Shozen was born in 1579, during one of the most tumultuous periods in Japanese history, the Sengoku Jidai, or Warring States period. The country was a battlefield, with regional lords, daimyos, fighting endlessly for power. Shozen's early life would have been marked by the constant thunder of war drums, the clanging of swords, and the smell of fire and death in the air, but that wasn't all. Japan, at this time, was also witnessing significant cultural shifts. This wasn't just about samurai and swords, this was a period that saw the flourishing of Japanese tea culture, art, and even the influence of foreign powers, including the Portuguese and the Dutch, introducing Christianity and firearms into Japan's already complex society. The juxtaposition of violence and beauty, of samurai ethics and spiritual awakening, would form the backdrop of Shozen's formative years. As he grew up, he became part of the samurai class, following the path that seemed set for him from birth. But, as history often shows us, destiny has a way of twisting. Shozen's life would take unexpected turns, blending the warrior ethos with the profound depths of Zen Buddhism, and can you imagine the battle that must have raged within him? A man steeped in the martial tradition, suddenly turning to the quiet, meditative path of Zen. How could a man, whose life had been so full of violence and warfare, suddenly embrace the peaceful, mindful philosophy of Zen Buddhism? The historical context, a nation torn apart. To understand Shozen, we have to dive deep into the historical context of his time. The Sengoku period, roughly 1467 to 1600, was an era of civil war and social upheaval, where Japan was divided into countless warring factions, each fighting for dominance. This was the world Shozen was born into, where samurai like him were not just warriors but also political actors, enforcers of feudal law, and protectors of their lord's interests. The Sengoku period was a time of ruthless ambition and survival. Daimyos constantly fought to expand their territory, alliances shifted as quickly as they were made, and the common people often suffered in the crossfire. For a young samurai like Shozen, this was the only life he knew, a life where honor was intertwined with violence, and loyalty was often a matter of life and death. Yet, despite the chaos, this period also laid the groundwork for the emergence of the Tokugawa shogunate, which would bring a relative peace that lasted over 250 years. The pivotal moment came in 1600 with the Battle of Sekigahara, where Tokugawa Ieyasu secured his power, uniting Japan under his rule and marking the end of the Sengoku era. Suzuki Shozen fought in this very battle under the Tokugawa banner, serving as a loyal samurai. But can you imagine what it must have felt like for him, standing on that battlefield, watching the violence and death all around him, wondering if there could be more to life than this endless cycle of war? It was a moment of transformation not just for Japan, but for Shozen himself. After this, as peace slowly settled over the country, Shozen's own inner turmoil would come to a head. The Tokugawa shogunate, a new order. With the rise of the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan entered a period of relative peace, known as the Edo period. The country was finally unified, and the daimyos were brought under the firm control of the Tokugawa family. For the samurai, this was both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, the constant warfare that had defined their lives was finally over. On the other hand, many samurai found themselves without a purpose. What was the role of a warrior in a time of peace? This was the question that Suzuki Shozen would spend much of his life trying to answer. Like many other samurai, he found himself disillusioned by the end of the Sengoku period. The constant violence that had once defined his life was gone, and he was left to grapple with the meaning of his existence. What was the point of being a samurai in a world that no longer needed warriors? It's here that we begin to see the seeds of Shozen's transformation from warrior to monk. The world was changing, and Shozen would change with it, though the journey would be anything but simple. Zen Buddhism, the spiritual awakening in Japan. Before we dive into Shozen's personal transformation, it's essential to grasp what Zen Buddhism was all about in Japan at the time. Zen had been introduced to Japan from China, where it was called Chan, in the 12th century, but it wasn't until the 13th and 14th centuries that it truly took root, thanks to figures like Dogen and Eisai. Zen emphasized direct experience and meditation, zazen, over ritual and scripture. For Zen practitioners, the goal was not to intellectualize about enlightenment but to experience it directly through the practice of meditation and mindfulness. Zen philosophy, with its focus on the impermanence of life, the stripping away of ego, and the importance of mindfulness, found a natural resonance with many samurai. After all, the life of a warrior was fraught with danger and death. Zen offered a way to face these challenges with calmness and clarity, to live fully in the present moment without fear of what the future might hold. But for Shozen, Zen was more than just a way to deal with the pressures of being a warrior. It became the answer to the deeper questions that had plagued him since his time on the battlefield. What was the point of all the violence? Why did he feel so empty, even after fighting for his lord and his honor? Zen offered him a way to reconcile his life as a samurai with his desire for spiritual peace. 2. A samurai turned Zen monk, the transformation. Now, let's pause for a moment and imagine the inner conflict Suzuki Shozen must have experienced. For more than 4 decades, he lived as a samurai, a life governed by the code of Bushido, the way of the warrior. To be a samurai wasn't just a profession, it was an identity, a way of life rooted in discipline, honor, loyalty, and martial prowess. But underneath the armor, can't you just feel the weight of his internal struggle? What happens when a man trained to kill starts to question the very meaning of violence, loyalty, and life itself? Shozen's transformation is fascinating, isn't it? He fought in the Battle of Sekigahara. A battle that marked the turning point of Japan's history. After years of civil war, Tokugawa Ieyasu emerged victorious, consolidating his power and bringing an era of peace, though it was a peace born from violence and bloodshed. Shozen, like many samurai, must have been caught between a sense of accomplishment and profound disillusionment. The battle was won, but what had he truly gained? Imagine what it must have been like for him, to see comrades fall on the battlefield, to confront death up close, over and over again. Each swing of the sword, each victory, must have felt more hollow than the last. How could a man who had dedicated his life to warfare suddenly find peace in the very thing that had brought him such turmoil? It's here that the story of Suzuki Shozen becomes one of not just personal growth, but spiritual awakening, the turning point. Walking away from the sword, at the age of 42, Shozen made a decision that shocked many of his peers. He laid down his sword and took up the path of Zen Buddhism. What could have driven a samurai, a man of war, honor, and discipline, to abandon his military career? This wasn't just a rejection of violence, it was an attempt to find a deeper meaning in life, one that transcended the superficial glory of battle. But let's not mistake his decision as an easy one. How difficult must it have been for him to walk away from the only life he had known? To renounce the identity of a samurai was to give up his status, his livelihood, and perhaps even his sense of self. But here's the thing, Shozen didn't view his decision as a rejection of the samurai code. Far from it. Instead, he sought to integrate the core values of Bushido, honor, loyalty, discipline, with the profound spiritual insights of Zen. And isn't that the most interesting part? He didn't see these two paths as contradictory but as complementary. Could a warrior not also seek enlightenment? Could the discipline of the battlefield translate to the discipline of the mind? For Shozen, the answer was a resounding yes. His transformation was less about abandoning one life for another and more about merging them into a cohesive philosophy that could guide him, and others, toward a life of both action and contemplation. But how did he do it? What did his Zen practice look like, and how did it shape his understanding of what it meant to be a samurai? 3. Zen and the Way of the Warrior. To understand Suzuki Shozen's unique philosophy, we need to delve into the core principles of Zen and Bushido, two seemingly different but surprisingly complementary traditions. At first glance, they may seem worlds apart. One is a philosophy of battle, the other of inner peace. But Shozen saw something deeper. He saw that both the way of the samurai and the path of Zen were, at their heart, about mastery, mastery of the body, mastery of the mind, and mastery of fear. Let's first look at Bushido, the code of the samurai. Bushido emphasized virtues like loyalty, discipline, honor, and courage. A samurai was expected to live and die by these principles. But what happens when a warrior is faced with the prospect of peace? When there are no more battles to fight, does his training become meaningless? This was the dilemma many samurai faced in the early Tokugawa period, and it's something Shozen wrestled with deeply. But here's where Shozen made an important connection. The same discipline that made a samurai an effective warrior could also make him a great practitioner of Zen. After all, Zen required intense focus, mental clarity, and the ability to let go of the ego, qualities that a samurai would need in battle. Shozen believed that the real fight wasn't against an external enemy but against the distractions of the mind, the fears that cloud judgment, and the desires that lead to suffering. Doesn't that completely change the way we think about the samurai? Instead of seeing them as mere warriors, Shozen's philosophy elevates them to spiritual seekers, using the battlefield as a path to enlightenment. Now, consider Zen Buddhism. At its core, Zen teaches the importance of mindfulness, meditation, zazen, and direct experience of reality. Unlike some other Buddhist schools, Zen isn't concerned with elaborate rituals or intellectual study. Instead, it focuses on here and now, stripping away illusions to reveal the true nature of existence. It teaches practitioners to confront impermanence and the emptiness of worldly attachments, a lesson that must have resonated deeply with Shozen after years of witnessing death and destruction. Shozen believed that Zen and Bushido could work hand in hand. Through meditation, a samurai could cultivate a calm, centered mind, even in the chaos of battle. He could transcend fear and confusion, allowing him to act with clarity and purpose. Shozen emphasized that true strength didn't come from physical prowess alone, but from mental clarity and moral integrity. Can you imagine the kind of warrior who combined the discipline of Bushido with the spiritual depth of Zen? It's no wonder that Shozen's philosophy has influenced martial artists and spiritual seekers for centuries. Mindfulness in battle. The Zen samurai, Shozen's approach wasn't just theoretical, he put it into practice. He believed that every action, whether in battle or in daily life, could be an opportunity for mindfulness. For Shozen, the battlefield wasn't just a place of violence but a training ground for the spirit. He taught that a warrior must cultivate jisei, self-awareness, and ji, righteousness, and that these virtues could only be truly mastered through Zen practice. In this way, a samurai could become a spiritual warrior, one who not only excelled in combat but also lived with wisdom and compassion. Imagine a warrior standing on the battlefield, calm and composed amidst the chaos. His movements are precise, his mind clear, unclouded by fear or anger. This was Shozen's ideal, a samurai who had transcended his own ego, who could face death without flinching, and who acted not out of personal ambition or hatred but out of a deep sense of duty and righteousness. Doesn't that change the whole picture of what it means to be a warrior? This integration of Zen and Bushido is perhaps Shozen's greatest legacy. He showed that martial training didn't have to be about violence or personal gain. Instead, it could be a path to enlightenment, a way to overcome the illusions that bind us and to live with true freedom. What a revolutionary idea! And yet, doesn't it make perfect sense? In both Zen and Bushido, the goal is the same: to live with integrity, to face life and death with courage, and to cultivate a mind that is clear, focused, and free from attachments. For Shozen's major works and teachings, Suzuki Shozen was not only a warrior and monk but also a prolific writer. Through his writings, he shared his insights with others, hoping to guide them toward a more mindful and ethical life. His works weren't just for monks or samurai, they were meant for everyone: farmers, merchants, and even rulers. Shozen believed that the principles of Zen could be applied to all aspects of life, whether in battle, business, or daily work. But his writings weren't dry philosophical treatises, they were lively, practical, and often written in the form of dialogues or letters, making them accessible to a wide audience. One of his most important works is Ingamondo, or Dialogues on Cause and Effect. In this text, Shozen explores the Buddhist principle of karma, the idea that every action has consequences, whether in this life or the next. He applies this concept to the life of a warrior, arguing that actions motivated by selfish desires will only lead to suffering, while those based on righteousness lead to spiritual growth. This wasn't just abstract philosophy for Shozen, it was a practical guide for how to live a life of integrity, both on and off the battlefield. Another significant work is Fumoto no Kyuzawake, in which Shozen offers advice for both samurai and commoners on how to live a life guided by Zen principles. He emphasizes the importance of mindfulness in all aspects of life, from martial training to everyday tasks. For Shozen, every moment was an opportunity to practice Zen, to cultivate awareness and self-discipline. He taught that the true measure of a person's character wasn't found in grand gestures or heroic deeds but in the small, everyday acts of mindfulness and compassion. Perhaps one of his most practical works for samurai was Roankyo, in which Shozen outlines methods for maintaining mental clarity and focus, especially in times of stress or danger. He taught that meditation and self-discipline were just as important for a warrior as physical training. Without a clear mind, how could a samurai act with precision and righteousness in the heat of battle? For Shozen, Zen wasn't something to be practiced in isolation from the world. It was something to be lived, moment by moment, in the midst of life's challenges. 5. The role of death in Shozen's philosophy. Death, it looms so large in the life of a samurai, doesn't it? The constant awareness of death was a fundamental part of the warrior's existence. But for Suzuki Shozen, this ever-present shadow of mortality became the central axis around which his philosophy revolved. After witnessing so much death in his life as a warrior, Shozen didn't just seek to conquer it on the battlefield, he sought to understand it, to master it from within. In Zen Buddhism, the concept of impermanence is central. All things are transient: life, success, happiness, even suffering. For many, this is a difficult truth to accept, especially for warriors who are trained to control and dominate their environment. But Shozen took this Zen principle and applied it directly to the way of the warrior, creating a profound meditation on death. He believed that only by fully embracing the inevitability of death could a warrior achieve true clarity and fearlessness. What does it mean to die before you die? Shozen urged his followers, especially samurai, to meditate on their own mortality, not as an abstract concept, but as an ever-present reality. He wanted them to face the fact that death could come at any moment, and that the fear of death was what clouded the mind and corrupted actions. By meditating on death, Shozen believed that a warrior could free himself from the grip of fear and live with greater freedom, precision, and purpose. The samurai's relationship with death. Let's delve into the samurai's unique relationship with death. For centuries, the samurai were expected to be ready to die at any moment, whether in battle or by their own hand through the act of seppuku, ritual suicide. Honor was placed above life itself. If a samurai brought dishonor upon himself or his lord, death was seen as the only way to restore that honor. Yet, this willingness to die was not always accompanied by a deep understanding of death itself. Many samurai were trained to fight and die for their lord. But they hadn't truly come to terms with their own mortality in a spiritual sense. This is where Shozen's Zen training provided a radical shift in perspective. Shozen taught that a warrior who feared death could never truly be free. Fear would cloud his judgment, paralyze him in critical moments, and lead him to act out of desperation or self-preservation rather than honor and righteousness. But what if the warrior could overcome that fear? What if he could embrace death, not as an enemy, but as a natural part of life? For Shozen, this was the key to becoming a true warrior. A samurai who had come to terms with death could face any challenge with calmness and clarity, without the distractions of fear or attachment. Imagine the transformation this would bring. Picture a samurai, sword in hand, standing on the battlefield with complete calm. He knows that death is a possibility, maybe even an inevitability, but instead of being overwhelmed by fear, he moves with precision, guided by principles higher than his own survival. This is the kind of warrior Shozen envisioned, one who had died before dying and could therefore live and fight with complete freedom. Zen meditation and death, confronting mortality. How, then, did Shozen recommend that warriors confront death? The answer lay in zazen, or seated meditation. Through the practice of meditation, Shozen believed that a person could strip away the layers of illusion that create fear, especially the fear of death. In zazen, practitioners are taught to observe their thoughts without attachment, allowing them to rise and fall like waves on the surface of the ocean. Over time, this practice reveals the transient nature of all things, including life itself. For Shozen, this direct experience of impermanence was the antidote to the fear of death. By repeatedly confronting the reality of death in meditation, a samurai could prepare himself mentally and emotionally for the moment when he would face death on the battlefield. It's one thing to know intellectually that death is inevitable, but it's quite another to experience this truth on a deep, personal level through meditation. Shozen's teachings encouraged warriors to engage with death not as something to be feared but as a teacher, a guide toward living a more mindful and purposeful life. But this wasn't just about combat or battle. Shozen's teachings on death had broader implications for daily life. He believed that by accepting the reality of death, people could free themselves from the petty concerns and attachments that often lead to suffering. In this way, the practice of meditation became a path not only to physical courage but also to inner peace and ethical clarity. When you truly understand that life is impermanent, it changes how you live each moment, doesn't it? Suddenly, there's no room for selfishness, greed, or attachment to trivial things. Every action, every decision, becomes infused with a sense of urgency and mindfulness. Death as a test of spiritual progress. In many ways, Shozen viewed death as the ultimate test of a person's spiritual development. He taught that how a warrior faced death revealed the depth of his understanding of Zen. Was his mind clear and calm? Or was he still grasping at life, fearful of losing his sense of self? For Shozen, the goal was not simply to fight well but to die well. A good death, in his view, was one that was faced with dignity, courage, and acceptance. It was the final expression of a life lived in alignment with Zen principles. This concept of a good death was deeply intertwined with the idea of enlightenment. Shozen believed that true enlightenment involved the complete transcendence of the ego, the self that clings to life out of fear of death. By confronting death head-on through meditation and spiritual practice, a person could dissolve the boundaries of the self and experience the interconnectedness of all life. In this state of enlightenment, death was no longer something to be feared, it was simply a part of the natural flow of existence. Imagine the power of this realization. To live with the understanding that life and death are two sides of the same coin, that neither can exist without the other, this was the essence of Shozen's philosophy. And it wasn't just for monks or warriors, it was a lesson that applied to everyone. Shozen believed that by facing death, we could learn how to live more fully, more authentically, and with greater compassion for others. 6. Ethics, self-awareness, and discipline. One of the most profound contributions of Suzuki Shozen's philosophy was his emphasis on ethics and self-awareness in the life of a warrior. While traditional samurai culture certainly valued honor and loyalty, Shozen added a new dimension to these values by grounding them in a deep sense of moral responsibility and spiritual clarity. For Shozen, being a great warrior wasn't just about mastering the art of combat, it was about mastering oneself, one's thoughts, emotions, and motivations. The role of Zanshin, the remaining mind, a key concept in Shozen's teachings was Zanshin, which can be translated as remaining mind. In martial arts, Zanshin refers to the state of heightened awareness and focus that a warrior maintains even after delivering a strike. It's the idea that one should remain fully present and aware. Not just during the action but in the moments afterward, ready to respond to whatever comes next. But for Shozen, Zanshin wasn't just a martial technique, it was a way of life. He taught that a warrior must be constantly vigilant over his own thoughts and emotions, learning to observe them without attachment or judgment. This state of mindful awareness allowed the warrior to respond to any situation with clarity and decisiveness, rather than being driven by impulsive reactions or selfish desires. Imagine living with this kind of awareness. How often do we act out of habit or react impulsively to situations without truly thinking them through? Shozen believed that the key to living a life of integrity was cultivating this ongoing mindfulness. This Zanshin, in everything we do. Whether on the battlefield or in daily life, the ability to remain fully present and aware was essential to acting with moral clarity, ethics, and the warrior's path. For Shozen, the discipline of the warrior had to be grounded in ethics. He believed that a warrior's strength did not come solely from his ability to wield a weapon or his willingness to die in battle. Instead, true strength came from his ability to control his mind, act ethically, and remain aware of his inner motivations. This required intense self-discipline, which Shozen believed could be cultivated through Zen practice. Shozen's teachings emphasized that actions driven by selfishness or personal ambition were the root of suffering. He taught that a warrior must act not out of a desire for glory or recognition but out of a deep sense of righteousness, Gi. In his view, a warrior who fought for selfish reasons was no better than a bandit. The true warrior, in contrast, was one who fought for the greater good, who acted out of a sense of duty to his lord, his family, and his community. But how does one cultivate this sense of righteousness? Shozen believed that the answer lay in self-awareness. A warrior who was not aware of his own inner motivations could easily be led astray by pride, anger, or greed. Through the practice of Zen, a warrior could develop the ability to observe his thoughts and emotions without being controlled by them. This self-awareness allowed the warrior to act with greater clarity and integrity, even in the heat of battle. In this sense, Shozen's philosophy can be seen as an early form of what we might now call mindful leadership. He believed that a leader, or a warrior, must be constantly aware of his own motivations and actions, ensuring that they align with higher principles rather than personal gain. This idea is just as relevant today as it was in Shozen's time, don't you think? Whether in business, politics, or personal life, the ability to lead with mindfulness and ethical clarity is a skill that transcends time and culture. Discipline and the samurai spirit. Discipline was, of course, a central tenet of the samurai way of life, but Shozen took it a step further. For him, discipline wasn't just about following orders or mastering techniques, it was about mastering the self. He taught that the greatest battle a warrior could fight was the battle against his own ego. And this battle required constant vigilance, self-discipline, and humility. Shozen's teachings on discipline were not confined to the battlefield. He believed that discipline should be applied to all aspects of life, from the way a person conducted business to how they treated their family and neighbors. For Shozen, there was no separation between the spiritual and the practical. Every moment was an opportunity to practice discipline. Mindfulness and self-awareness. 7. Legacy and influence. Suzuki Shozen's ideas have had a lasting influence on Japanese martial arts, Zen practice, and even modern leadership philosophies. His unique blend of Bushido and Zen has resonated not only with warriors but with anyone seeking a more mindful and purposeful life. While his teachings were revolutionary for his time, they have since become foundational in the development of what is sometimes referred to as Zen martial arts, where the practice of martial disciplines is seen not just as a physical pursuit but as a path to spiritual enlightenment. Influence on Japanese martial arts. Shozen's integration of Zen and Bushido has had a profound impact on the development of martial arts in Japan, particularly in schools like Kendo, Iaido, and Aikido. In these disciplines, the practice of martial arts is not simply about defeating an opponent but about cultivating a deeper sense of self-awareness, discipline, and ethical clarity. In particular, Shozen's emphasis on Zanshin, the state of constant mindfulness and awareness, has become a core principle in many martial arts traditions. Practitioners are taught to remain fully present in every moment, to move with intention and clarity, and to respond to challenges with calmness and precision. This emphasis on mindfulness has helped to transform martial arts from a purely physical practice into a spiritual path that fosters personal growth and enlightenment. Global spread of Zen and martial arts. Shozen's ideas have also influenced the global spread of Zen and martial arts. In the 20th century, as Japanese martial arts and Zen Buddhism spread beyond Japan, Shozen's teachings found a new audience among practitioners in the West. The concept of the spiritual warrior, which Shozen helped to pioneer, has become a central theme in many modern martial arts schools around the world. In addition, the rise of mindfulness and meditation practices in the West has brought renewed attention to Shozen's ideas about self-awareness, ethics, and discipline. His teachings on the integration of mindfulness and martial arts have inspired not only martial artists but also business leaders, athletes, and individuals seeking to live more mindful and purposeful lives. 8. Conclusion. Suzuki Shozen stands out as a unique and remarkable figure in Japanese history, someone who successfully merged the seemingly divergent paths of the samurai and the Zen monk. Through his teachings, Shozen offered a path for warriors and everyday people alike to cultivate spiritual awareness, ethical behavior, and mental clarity. His philosophy was revolutionary for its time, but its relevance has endured through the centuries. Shozen's life and work show us that the way of the warrior doesn't have to be limited to violence and discipline. It can also be a path to enlightenment, a way of living with integrity, mindfulness, and compassion. In a world that is often filled with fear, confusion, and ethical dilemmas, Shozen's teachings offer us a way forward, a way to face life's challenges with courage, clarity, and purpose. So, as we look back on the life of Suzuki Shozen, we are left with a profound sense of inspiration. Here was a man who fought on the battlefield and in the realm of the spirit, who sought not only to master the art of combat but to master himself. His legacy reminds us that true strength comes not from the sword, but from the mind, the heart, and the soul. Isn't that a lesson we could all benefit from today?